Okay, imagine this for a second. What if the subtle feelings inside each of us, moods, thoughts weren't just ours?
Hmm.
What if they somehow like flowed together and actually shaped the big picture stuff in society?
You mean like crime rates or community well-being?
Exactly. Or even how well kids are doing in school. Could there be a real link?
Well, what's really fascinating, and this comes right from the sources you shared, is the idea that maybe we could find a mathematical connection there.
Mathematical. Between feelings and, say, crime stats.
Kind of. There's this theory mentioned, the refined circle and dot theory. It proposes a link between our inner world and a wider reality, maybe through something called resonance patterns.
Resonance patterns, like instruments vibrating together.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Like one vibrating string making another one vibrate if they're tuned similarly. The theory suggests these patterns are tied to our psychological state.
Okay, let's dig into that. So, these resonance patterns. The sources hint they might connect to advanced physics concepts?
They do. And it suggests these patterns reflect how we process things, maybe stress, for instance. And crucially, one note, survey note 7, I think, suggests we might even be able to measure these,
Measures them. How?
maybe through brain activity. Things like EEG patterns are mentioned as a possibility.
Right. So, if you could put a number sort of on individual resonance.
Exactly. Then the theory opens up this potential pathway to see how those small individual vibrations might, aggregate, how they might show up as the larger societal trends we track.
So, fluctuations in crime rates, not just economics, but maybe collective vibes.
It's a possibility the theory explores, and it suggests it works both ways. Our inner states influence society, but societal conditions also feedback and affect our individual resonance. It's a loop.
Wow. Okay, but building a formula for that sounds incredibly complex, like
Hmm.
trying to predict the weather from a butterfly flapping its
It's
wings.
a huge challenge, no doubt, but the sources offer a potential starting point, a theoretical bridge.
How so? What kind of tools?
Well, they mention things like statistical mechanics, understanding a whole system by looking at the average behavior of its parts.
Right, like predicting gas pressure from molecule movements.
Exactly. Or complex systems modeling, which looks at how patterns emerge from many interacting parts. And differential equations could help model how these things change over time.
So, defining the parts is key then. What are the variables we'd be juggling?
Good question. On the micro level, you need ways to represent that individual resonance, maybe linked to psychological assessments or that EEG data.
And the macro level.
That's the data we already have. Crime rates, let's call it C, mental health prevalence M, educational attainment E, those kinds of things.
What about stuff in between, like poverty or culture?
Yes, the sources suggest those intermediary factors, socioeconomic conditions, cultural norms, would absolutely need to be considered. They act as a kind of conduit or modifier.
So, how would you actually write a relationship? Got a simple example?
Conceptually, you could start simple. Maybe higher average resonance, RAV-D, correlates with lower crime, C. So C equals some function of RAV-D.
See, Gaffra.
Something like that to start. But crucially, you'd need those feedback loops. Maybe high crime then lowers the average resonance. And you'd ideally want to link it back to the theory's core ideas, the micro and macro dots, vibrational states, maybe even non-local effects.
The sources actually sketch out some example formulas, don't they? Just as thought experiments.
You do. Very simplified, of course. One looks like SAO RAV-G plus MIO EMV plus A.
Okay, break that down.
S is a societal outcome, RAV-G is the average resonance, E and IV is the environment. Those Greek letters, alpha, beta, gamma, are just weighting factors like dial showing how much each part matters.
And there was a more complex one.
Yeah, differential equation, DSDT, E of K, RAV-J, SL plus EO and VIC, AV. This looks at the rate of change of the societal outcome over time, how fast things are improving or declining based on resonance and environment. But again, these are just illustrative concepts.
Understood. Still feels like a massive undertaking. What are the biggest hurdles?
Oh, they're significant. Society is just incredibly complex. Quantifying resonance reliably, that's a huge question mark.
Data requirements must be immense too.
Absolutely. You need enormous detailed data sets to test and validate anything. Plus, it requires expertise from physics, sociology, psychology, mathematics, real interdisciplinary work.
So it's speculative, but the sources suggest it's theoretically possible within this specific framework.
That seems to be the conclusion drawn from the material, yes. The refined circle and dot theory, with its focus on quantifiable resonance and this micro-macro link, potentially provides a foundation. It could enrich the theory itself.
It really gives you something to chew on, doesn't it? Trying to find a mathematical language for, well, for us and society.
It does, and it leaves you with a pretty profound thought. How deeply are our inner lives actually connected to the world we build together?
Yeah.
If we could understand these links mathematically, even partially, could that offer totally new ways to tackle societal problems? Imagine addressing crime or mental health by considering collective resonance.
A completely different perspective.
Exactly. It's that potential interconnectedness, maybe even expressible in formulas, that's the truly provocative idea to mull over from these sources.